Unbelievable, ridiculous, and impossible are but a few terms that have been thrown at Jim Barfield in the last 8 years before he would present his research for the first time. But after 5 minutes into the full Copper Scroll Project disclosure, even the most rigid skeptic sat up and listened. The staff of the Copper Scroll Project realizes that empty claims can be made by anyone. Claims can indicate that you can lose 5 pounds overnight, get rich quick, or say an important biblical discovery may be imminent. With that in mind, we will be disclosing a very small portion of Jim Barfield's research, releasing just enough to show the possibility that an important discovery may truly be on the horizon. This short video is not designed to convince, but rather to show you that there is much to be considered in contemplating that Kumran could very well be where Jeremiah hid the treasures of the temple. 5 men wrote and buried the treasures of the Copper Scroll, assisted by 5 teams of workers. Each team buried a designated amount of temple treasures, starting with writer number 1, who buried in 12 locations. This graphic shows the handwriting style and pattern of Hebrew words from the Copper Scroll. The second writer buried 12. The third, 11. The fourth, 17. And the fifth buried 5. An ancient document written in the 1600s called Emek Ha-Melech, or Valley of the King, records the history and gives details about the scroll. It informs us that the material used to record the information on was a luachno hoshet, or a copper sheet, verifying that there was indeed a record made of the buried treasures, and the record was written on a copper scroll. The opening lines of Emek Ha-Melech goes on to describe who wrote the Copper Scroll and describes in more detail the enormity of the treasures. It states, "These records were written by 5 righteous men, Shamar Halavi, Hezekiah, Zidkiah, Haggai the prophet, and Zechariah son of Iddo the prophet." If the manuscript is correct, it actually names 2 biblical prophets as scribes for the Copper Scroll. So when we look at a facsimile of it, we could be looking at the handwriting of the biblical prophets Haggai and Zechariah. The possibility that we could be looking at the handwriting of these 2 prophets from the Bible on the Copper Scroll truly excites us. It's one more element to give plausibility to the validity of the Copper Scroll. Let us now begin showing a small portion of the Copper Scroll Project research and let you decide if there is plausible evidence for the treasures of the house to have been located. First, next to the Temple Mount, Kumran would become the second most important place in Israel to those that believe in God and His Holy Scriptures. Kumran was so important that those that laid out the floor plan designed the exterior of Kumran and its prominent features to mirror the holy city of Jerusalem. Each of the locations named in the yellow portion of the graphic here are directly from the Copper Scroll, and the image in white is Jerusalem at the time of Jeremiah. Notice how Qumran's major features match Jerusalem amazingly well. Is it possible that this is a coincidence? Is it possible that the men of Qumran designed it to look like and even bear the same names and functions as the ancient city of Jerusalem? The similarities are striking. The resemblance and matching is just too close to cast off as chance. There are many reasons that lead us to believe that the Copper Scroll is talking about Qumran. Consider some of the locations in Qumran given by the Copper Scroll. Location 1.
Under the ruins in the valley of Achor, at the steps extending east, 40 cubits long, are silver service vessels weighing 17 talents.
In referencing this section, we can easily see Qumran being in the middle of Achor. Plus, in the ruins of Qumran, we find one of the steps heading east, just as described on the scroll. And they are exactly 40 cubits long. The red dot on these pictures are quite possibly the most logical place for the 17 talents of silver vessels to be buried. We know that 2 Maccabees tells us that Jeremiah is the one who buried the wealth of the temple. Is it possible that he buried it at Qumran? Furthermore, Jeremiah chapter 32:8 tells us that Jeremiah redeemed family property in the land of Benjamin as required for the Jubilee year and secured the title deed in stone jars. Qumran in the land of Benjamin and the Dead Sea Scrolls verify the practice of preserving documents in stone jars. Could Qumran possibly be the site of temple treasures and Jeremiah's title deed for Benjamite land? Remember, the Temple Mount was built in the land of Benjamin, not Judah, but we still see more. Location 2.
Accommodated in the built mound of the dry cistern is gold. In the dry fountain of the great ruined courtyard of the peristyle in the soft mire is hidden polished gold. In front of the highest opening are 900 talents.
According to the scroll, Writer 1 buried gold in the large dry cistern located in the peristyle in the front of the upper opening of the fountain. The first clue to look for is the courtyard. There are two, one large courtyard at the highest point of the complex and another dividing the buildings in the middle of Kumran. Jim chose the largest courtyard at the fountain coming in from the west. The next notation, or clue, is the transliterated Greek word peristilon or peristyle. If you can read Hebrew letters, you can see that Writer 1 wrote the Greek word in Hebrew script on the right side of the copper scroll facsimile as shown. Remember, Hebrew reads from right to left with no vowels. Interestingly, the word peristyle, still used today, means an enclosed court. The remains of the peristyle in Kumran still encases the fountain and courtyard of Kumran exactly as required, giving further evidence that the copper scroll could indeed be talking about Kumran. Although the tall courtyard walls are now all but gone, the outline of the courtyard and fountain are easily visible in the photo. If Jim is correct about the location, approximately $1,179,360,000 in gold for the coming temple rests at this location just below the surface at Kumran. Location 3. We have chosen not to detail Location 3 to maintain some level of security, but it is the same cave that was used by Writer 5 for Location 57, so Location 3 and 57 are the same. The buried cave. That place is undoubtedly the most important site of all on the copper scroll. Though we cannot give all the details, we will tell you that Location 3 says the men of Kumran placed the ephod inside of the cave as Writer 1 was burying his designated allotment of treasures. What is the ephod? It is the breastplate of righteousness that was worn by the high priest on the Day of Atonement. Writer 3 mentions that gleaming chamber, which we believe to be the tent of meeting, connecting the cave, the ephod, and the tabernacle to Location 3 and 57. Think for a moment. What could the writer mean by the gleaming chamber? Remember, the entire inner walls of both the temple and the tabernacle were completely covered in polished gold, making the chambers like a house of mirrors. With the 7-branched menorah constantly burning, and more importantly, the glory of God above the Ark of the Covenant radiating in the most holy place, the entire inner chamber would be blazing in God's glory. Locations 3 and 57, the possible buried cave, was the location that the greatest amount of non-ferrous metals were found of all the locations scanned. Are we to believe that all this non-ferrous metal, silver and gold, is there by just coincidence? Or can we at least consider the plausibility that this really is the location where Jeremiah buried the treasures of the temple? Location 4. As an investigator, Location 4 is the most profoundly identifiable of all the Copper Scroll locations, simply because it has so many distinct features named in the Copper Scroll. Watch and see how Kumran matches the Copper Scroll to a T on this location alone. Again, giving credence to Kumran being the burial place of the temple treasures.
At the double entry pool with the entrance by the north edge of the community, 6 cubits against the white immersion pool of oblation rising from the soil and goes down into the left and is high above the soft mire dig 3 cubits for 40 silver talents.
Like a fingerprint, we can lay the description given in Location 4 on a certain mikvah or baptismal pool at Kumran, and we can see an amazing match. Let's go back through the requirements of the description. 1. The pool must have 2 entries. 2. It has to be at the north end of the community. 3. The measurement against the pool must be 6 cubits. 4. The pool must be white. 5. It must be a pool of oblation or mikvah. 6. It must rise high above the soil. 7. When entered, one must go down and to the left to mikvah. 8. It must be high above the mire, the same mud as the mire identified in Location 2. Can we find a pool like this at Kumran that matches the detailed description? Let's look. Here is probably the most detailed map of Kumran available, drawn to scale. This map contains all known obstructions and limitations created by the structures. Mr. Barfield used this map to identify locations and could tell if a selected spot was capable of providing enough space for the large amounts of precious metals and gems named on the scroll. As we zoom in on the absolute north end of the community, we notice that there is indeed a pool, a mikvah or baptismal that has 2 entries and has a sign saying that it was indeed a mikvah. Furthermore, the pool is identified at a later location in the Copper Scroll as the place where prophets were anointed, or a pool of oblation. But did the sides meet the required 6 cubits in length? Yes, the sides of the pool, where the 40 talents of silver are expected to be buried, are exactly 6 cubits long. As everyone else can see, although the pool's plaster coating is dirty, the pool was once completely white. Then, complying with the 6th requirement, the pool is the only mikveh at Kumran that extends much higher above the soil than all of the other pools at Kumran. It is high above the mire or mud of the water system, and it is the exact same mire named in location 2. Finally, the most distinctive feature is the entry. To go into this mikvah, one must step forward 5 steps, turn left, and then enter the main portion of the pool to submerge as required. This location is where rabbis, archaeologists, and a multitude of others just slap their foreheads and say, "This is so simple." There are 8 solid matches at this one location. Is the hiding place of the Ark location 3 and 57? We've given you a small but convincing amount of evidence that the Copper Scroll is talking about Qumran as the site of all its treasures. Trust us when we tell you that the research provides a vast amount of additional evidence to support our claims. The numerous and undeniable matches of the site descriptions found in the Copper Scroll and Qumran are secured. Now we are going to explain why Jim believes that even the furnishings of the house of God could be included among the precious artifacts based just on the words from the Copper Scroll. Location 3 says,
In the red heap is the wine vessels of the gleaming chamber, the ephod and the entire 10th of the tithe of pouring vessels from the treasury.
The person burying the artifacts, again very possibly a biblical prophet, includes in his narrative the wine vessels of the gleaming chamber, a 10th of the pouring vessels from the treasury, and the ephod, the breastplate of righteousness. If the high priest is to conduct his services to their fullest, he must have the ephod, a powerful indication that the items in the cave are far beyond mere silver and gold. Then in the most important notation of all, location 57 of the Copper Scroll, it says,
In the great hollow entry, which involves all the wealth of the house, all the weight is counted in talents. Placed and hidden in the dry entrance on the north side of the red heap that is buried by the edge is another copy of the record declaring the scattered words and the trapped wealth. United, they are one.
2 Maccabees says that Jeremiah took the altar of incense, the table of showbread, the tabernacle of Moses, and the Ark of the Covenant into a great hollow and buried the entrance, just as location 57 states. If Jim is correct, the entrance to that cave may be walled shut. That is why we are so excited that the test results from the lab at CTL Group came back indicating man-made mortar at the suspected cave site. The description from the scroll matches the location found by Jim Barfield amazingly well, but the writers did one more fascinating thing. They buried locations 1, 2, and 3 in a perfectly straight line, with 3 being the cave. Then the last 5 are buried in a perfectly straight line, with location 57 being, again, the buried cave. The most telling possibility, however, comes from the words in the scroll, the wealth of the house. The words, wealth of the house, is not the monetary value of the gold, but rather referring to the articles of the temple itself. Are all the furnishings of the house of God, the ashes of the red heifer, and even a title deed from Jeremiah in that cave? The clues keep mounting as Jim and the Copper Scroll Project team press to get permission to excavate for the most important discovery in history. Our videos are not meant to disprove or discredit other researchers, whether they are working on the Copper Scroll or searching for the Ark of the Covenant elsewhere. We know that many hold closely to the work of Ron Wyatt. We on the Copper Scroll Project and the 119 Ministries greatly respect Mr. Wyatt's work and his memory. Be assured, we will rejoice no matter where the treasures of the house of God are found. Our goal in this video is to share the great possibility laid out in Jim Barfield's research pertaining to the Copper Scroll. We wish we could share more at this time, but as mentioned earlier, this short video was not designed to convince you, but rather to show that there is much to be considered. There is much in contemplating that Qumran could really be where Jeremiah hid the treasures of the temple. Nothing can prove this is the case without actually doing a proper excavation of the site. However, we believe that even with this little sample of information given, you can see that there really is much to consider. Not only that the scroll is actually referring to Qumran, but also that Qumran could very well be the place that Jeremiah hid the temple treasures and the title deed to a portion of the land of Benjamin. Please join us by contacting the Israeli government and encourage them to do a proper excavation at these locations at Qumran. This is truly the only way to put these findings to the test. Thank you for watching. Please don't let another moment pass by. Contact the Israeli government today.